Hey, Bill, what day is it?
Hey gang, welcome back to Hey Bill, what day is it? Like the old commercial used to say, sometimes you feel like a nut and sometimes you don't. Well, today we're celebrating April 18th, National Pecan Day. There's a lot of people who take things pretty seriously about this luscious little fruit. From where they come from, to how they're harvested, to how they're pronounced. Pecans have a special place in the hearts across America. The first war relating to pecans is how to pronounce the name. You'll notice I'm using the pronunciation pecan, where others use pecan, and still others pecan. The word is actually derived from the Native American word pecan that describes nuts requiring a stone to crack. I think pecan comes closer to the pronunciation of pecan. My grandmother, you'd have loved her, she used to say that a pecan was a vessel stored under the bed before the advent of indoor plumbing. I think I agree with her. Since we live here in Texas, I thought it would be appropriate to discuss how the pecan relates to Texas. Texas is known for beef, oil, bluebonnets, barbecue, and the Alamo. You remember the Alamo? First, Texas is one of the top producers of pecans in the country, along with Georgia and New Mexico. The pecan is our state tree, and pecan pie is our state dessert. The Collins Street Bakery in Corsicana, Texas, is known for pecan pie and their world-famous fruitcake. Now wait a minute, I know what you're thinking. Who wants a fruitcake? They're hard and heavy and sickeningly sweet with the consistency of a gummy bear the size of a tire. Some think that the best use of a fruitcake is as a doorstop. That just tells me that you've never had a Collins Street Bakery fruitcake. They've been making those delicious wheels of goodness for over 125 years. You don't get that kind of longevity from selling bad food. Okay, but where do we get pecans? The pecan tree is native to America, and the United States produces the vast majority of the world's pecan crop. Pecans have a pretty hard shell, and as I already said, the Algonquin Indian word for pecan means nut that requires a stone to crack. I always like to tell the story of the time that my family and I were walking across the beautifully manicured lawns of Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary here in Fort Worth. Well, the campus is covered with beautiful pecan trees. And as I walked, I was picking up nuts and eating them, cracking them and eating them. And my son, who was about 12 at the time, asked how I did it. I handed him a big pecan and told him just squeeze it as hard as he could. He set out to crack that pecan as we walked along. In the meantime, I showed his two younger sisters how to take two pecans and squeeze them together to get one of them to crack. My son was getting more and more angry as he struggled with the pecan, as his little sisters happily cracked and ate theirs. I finally showed him the trick, so I think he's forgiven me, because you have to take two of them and you have to put them together and crack them against one another. Another use for pecans will prove that your mother wasn't always right. I'm sure you've heard her say, money doesn't grow on trees. Well, at one time, pecans were used as currency, so technically, money does grow on trees. Some people think that the Europeans brought beverage alcohol to America, and that's where the Native Americans got it. But some tribes were known to crush pecans, shells and all, and ferment them for a refreshing drink. The colonists were some of the first to discover this wonderful properties of these pecans and began to cultivate them. That industry has blossomed into quite an enterprise today. Many people don't know that you have to have two pecan trees to produce a crop. Every tree has both boy blossoms and girl blossoms, but not at the same time. As the nut grows, the outer fruit or husk dries up and ejects the seed that drops to the ground. That puts the squirrels to work, collecting and burying pecans for use as food later in the winter. The problem is that they forget where they put them. They forget where they buried them. and they have to go look for some more. This is also one of the ways we get new pecan trees, so squirrels can be somewhat helpful. If you've planted a pecan tree, you're going to have some patience because it's going to take 10 to 12 years before it produces. But once it gets going, it can produce fruit for up to 300 years. What are some things you probably shouldn't do with pecans? Well, they're not very good for juggling. And even though many come from Texas, they're still not big enough to play football with. What about some good things to do with pecans? How about making pralines? This is another source of contention among pecan lovers. Some call them pralines, some pralin, some praline. Some say pralines. The actual correct pronunciation is praline. Pecans make great ice cream and pecan butter. They're good on pecan-crusted fish, and the only way our son-in-law will eat sweet potatoes is with pecans on top. But my number one favorite way to eat pecans is as pie. No, not that kind of pie. This kind of pie. Great with ice cream or whipped cream, and the really good news is it's healthy. Pecans contain more than 19 vitamins and minerals and have been certified as heart-healthy food by the American Heart Association. Pecans are also a good source of calcium and magnesium and potassium, which help lower blood pressure. Most of the fat found in pecans is a healthy type called monounsaturated fat. Pecans are oblong and generally split in half when cracked. Both walnuts and pecans are said to look similar to human brain. That's why some call them brain food. I'll have to agree because I eat a lot of pecans, and look at me. Shockingly, there are more than 500 types of unique pecans that produce nuts that are each slightly different in flavor, color, shape, size, and texture. Gathering pecans is pretty easy, even for the amateur. Simply find a pecan tree, stand under it, look at the ground, and pick them up. When they're fully ripe, the outer husk will split open and drop the shell and seed onto the ground. If you found a tree with some nuts blanketing the ground nearby, chances are there are plenty more in the tree almost ready to drop. Give the tree a slight shake to increase your pecan bounty hunt. No special equipment needed. As you're picking them up, look for wormholes. If a worm has penetrated the shell, it will likely be rancid, whether or not the worm stuck around. Discard any nuts with holes or obvious cracks or other damage. So now for the weird fact about pecans. They're not actually a nut. A true nut is a dry fruit with a single seed encased in a hard, non-splitting wall. In other words, the hard outer shell of a true nut doesn't open on its own. Think walnuts and chestnuts and hazelnuts and acorns. In the scientific study of plants, almonds, cashews, and pecans are called a drupe. If we were to make the grocery store shelves more botanically correct, there would be signs like this. It would be accurate, but it just doesn't sound right. Changing the names now would be tough for both consumers and for botanists. Most consumers are pretty set on their culinary idea of a nut. There are a lot of conflicting facts like that. For instance, bananas are actually berries, but strawberries aren't. Don't argue about that with anyone either. You're not likely to change their minds. So what do we call all of these different oily seeds that we sometimes eat raw and sometimes roast and sprinkle with honey or salt or cinnamon or chili powder? Well, the term culinary nuts has been coming into favor as a kind of a catch-all description. And it's a pretty good one if you ask me. Unlike most health food, pecans disguise their nutritional value with their wonderful taste. How about that? They're good for you and they taste good too. Whether raw, roasted, candied, or even ground, pecans bring their own unique taste and texture to the table, which is often why you find them included in dishes such as desserts and salads and sides. You know, it's pretty wonderful how God has provided protection for this great little seed. That hard shell makes sure that the seed survives to be able to reproduce more pecans. He'll do the same thing for us when we go out and tell others about Him. We don't need to be afraid of messing up when we tell others about Christ, because He will always be with us. In Matthew 28:19 and 20, Jesus says, I have been given all authority in heaven and earth. Go to the people of all nations and make them my disciples. Baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teach them to do everything I have told you. And here's the best part, I will be with you always, even until the end of the world. If He's going to be with me, I have all the protection I need. I'm Bill Wasore, and this is Hey Bill, What Day Is It? Now get out there and enjoy some pecans. You'll have to pardon me while I finish up my mission for today with some pie. This kind of pie. Oh yeah, and have a triumphant day.